So, why do the video? What's the purpose?
So today I want to talk about tone. I've been getting a number of questions recently about my rig. I've got kind of a unique rig for a harmonica player. And so I wanted to talk about the equipment that I'm using and my theory about tone and tone exploration. So tone can be a major part of musical composition. You know, you have the songwriting, you know, the lyrics and the melody lines and the music, but you know, the thing that can really set you apart is the tone that you create, and a lot of that comes from the equipment that you use. You can create your own personality as a musician using whatever combination of gear that you decide on.
Describe examples of this amongst artists that folks may know. That clearly there are differences in vocal styles, but I would imagine with other instruments other than harmonica and violin or fiddle in this case.
Well, guitar is a really good instrument. There's tons of examples of guitarists that have really unique, specific tones to their sound. Perfect example is the difference in tone between B.B. King and Eric Clapton. They're both playing a very similar style of music, blues, but the equipment that they use, the guitars and the amps that they use, makes the tone and the personality. You know, the minute you hear a lick from Eric Clapton, you know it's Eric Clapton. Or the minute you hear the same lick from B.B. King, you know it's B.B. King playing Lucille. Pink Floyd is a great example of this, where the tone of all of the instrumentation on Pink Floyd's albums, on The Wall, on Dark Side of the Moon, Metal, you can just hear a little snippet of it and know immediately that it's Pink Floyd based on the tone. Same thing with like Peter Frampton. You know, the guitar work of Peter Frampton is very distinct tone. So you can really create a personality and something that's identifiable through the equipment that you use.
Okay. I guess for the recording purposes, we ought to note that you are Michael Crawford with Dr. Bacon, headquartered out of Asheville, North Carolina, and having started, I guess, up in Boone.
Yeah, started in Boone about 5 years ago, and recently moved to Asheville August before last.
Okay.
So a little over a year.
So, okay. Sorry about the interruption with that. So let's continue with tone.
Well, I do want to say first off that tone is a wonderful thing to explore. It can be a lot of fun, but just as a warning, the minute that you start, it's a money pit. and you'll never be satisfied. As much money as I've spent on my gear, there's thousands and thousands of dollars more left to spend to achieve the goal that I'm going for. But there are a couple of pitfalls with it. Money, and the fact that once you start layering a lot of different things on top of each other, a lot of different effects, you can very easily get to the point where you have a really muddy sound, or you can create a really fat, full sounding tone that's exactly what you hear in your head, and you can end up burying your bandmates behind your tone. So it's important to have a clear goal in mind of what you want to achieve, a sound in your head that you really know and identify, and it'll save you money, and it'll save you a little frustration when it comes time to record, and that your gear is specifically suited to what it is that you want to achieve. So have a clear goal in mind first to start off with.
Now, does that vary from song to song, or?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Some bands you'll want to have a very similar tone from song to song, and so you can just have Telecaster going into a Fender amp, and that's all you need. For all the songs that you use. You might change the tone knob a little bit or go from a clean channel to a drive channel, but if you're playing in a band like Dr. Bacon, which has a very wide array of musical genres, and between songs and within songs we change up the feel, then yeah, you should absolutely tailor your tone to the song. Have some things that are standard. The foundation of your tone should be personal to you, so that there's a foundation that you build off of with all the effects and whatnot. But I highly recommend having as much variety as possible.
Gives you options.
Absolutely. Flexibility is key, especially if you're wanting to play in multiple groups. You want to have the set foundation that's you and very identifiably you, and then everything else, all the little bells and whistles that tailor it to whatever it is that you're playing that day. So for me, I think it all starts with the instrument itself. So I play Lee Oscar harmonicas. I absolutely love them. They're perfectly tuned right out of the box. I've never had a single one that had any sort of factory defects or didn't play right, or where I needed to go in and fix the gapping of the reeds. They're bright, full-bodied. They really cut in a mix naturally, and they're fairly aggressive harmonicas. They're really well suited to playing blues, but also to playing like funk and rock and jazz. They are really easy to bend notes, which is like you can bend notes really easily, so you have a lot more range of notes than just the flat straight harmonica. That, and they're incredibly easy to maintain and clean. They have replaceable reed plates, so if you're out on the road and you end up breaking a reed, or one of your harmonicas goes out on a month-long tour, halfway through the tour, you can stop in at most music stores and get reed replacements for about half the cost of buying a whole new harmonica. So it's really, really nice as a touring instrument. It's different tone than a wood comb. You'll get a more warm, full body tone out of a wooden combed harmonica, but can't beat the functionality on the road. Mm-hmm. Next, for harmonica players, there's a lot of discussion about the microphones that you use. A lot of harmonica players go for the typical blues, overdriven tube amp sound, and a key component to that is a ceramic microphone. Sort of like the old, really old telephone microphones that sound sort of like you're talking through a tin can. And that really works for that tone specifically. If you're going for that blues, gritty, fat tone. I've gone a completely different way with creating my tone than most blues harmonica players. What I look for in a mic is something that's going to be clean, clear, very accurately representing what's being played into it. I don't want a mic that's going to color the sound at all. I don't want a mic that's going to add any character, because I want to use my effects and my amp to create the character and have more control over it. If you start off with a microphone that has a lot of character, then you can't dial that back later on. So I'm playing through a Shure SM58 right now, but it's by no means the dream microphone for this. Like with the harmonicas, it's a workhorse. It's the standard microphone that just about everyone uses. It's great on the road because it's so durable. You can hammer a nail with this thing, drive over it with a semi-truck, drag it through the bottom of a lake, pick it up, let it dry out, and use it the next day. It's indestructible pretty much. And with harmonica especially, and even more so when you start getting into effects and like wah pedals and overdrives and turning up to show volume, you need a microphone that has really good off-axis rejection. The polar pattern of the microphone should be really tight. That way you're not picking up bleed from the other instruments on stage. So you want something that has really good directional polar pattern to help cut out feedback and bleed from other instruments. I also have been starting to play violin, and I've got a Yamaha YEV 105 electric violin. It's a 5-string, gives me the tonal range of a viola as well as a violin with the added C string. And I've got a nice acoustic violin that I played in high school, and considered getting a pickup for that and a preamp for that, but given the fact that I'm playing in a rock and roll funk band with pretty loud stage volume, I wanted to go ahead and make sure that there's no chance of having any feedback from the violin on stage, especially since I'm going to be running it through a lot of effects, and just like with an open microphone, running through a lot of effects, you sort of invite feedback into the performance. So I went with the electric body, and the YEV series is an incredible bang for your buck. These things sound amazing and are not terribly expensive. They sound like a $2,000 violin for less than $1,000. I think I got this for $850 through our rep at Guitar Center. So if you're looking for an electric violin, really recommend the YEV series. And then for the bow, which with violin, the bow can make a huge difference on the sound. I'm playing a jet carbon fiber bow. I like a really aggressive bow, one where you don't have to really dig into the strings to get a really fat, full sound. You can play lightly and have a lot of dynamic range, but the minute that the bow moves on the string, it really starts to create a good sound. You can do a lot more subtle little things with an aggressive bow. So yeah, a JC Jet carbon fiber bow. I think they're about $100 or so. So next I want to talk about my amp, which is the centerpiece of my tone. This is a Line 6 Firehawk 1500 amplifier. They just released it this past year, and I would consider this, along with the Line 6 Helix floorboard, one of the crowning achievements of Line 6 amps. I know that a lot of people don't like solid-state digital amps. They feel like the tone just isn't there. When you have a tube amp, it's really real sounding, and a lot of early digital amps, a lot of early solid-state amps developed this reputation of sounding thin and plasticky and just not real. You couldn't get the depth of tone and the complexity of tone out of a digital amp. But I don't think that that's the case anymore. As computing power has gotten better and the technology has gotten better, you can recreate with really astounding accuracy the tone of various tube amps. And this thing has pretty much the entire library of Line 6 amp models and effects built into it. 6 speakers in a stereo wet dry wet configuration. It's a full frequency spectrum, full response amp. So this can be used for literally any instrument. Guitar, bass, keys. It's really well suited to anything. Unlike most guitar amps where the frequency range and frequency response isn't flat, it boosts certain areas to build the character of the amp, and that's how you get the difference in tone between a Marshall versus a Fender amp, or a Vox amp, or Mesa Boogie. This has full frequency spectrum, so when you're creating a tone, you're not limited by the amp at all. And what the amp can reproduce. If you want to get really low, you can get really low. If you want to get really high frequencies, you can get really high frequencies. So it's got 6 speakers, a horn for the high end, a 12-inch woofer, and then 2 coaxial speakers with, I believe, 4 and 2-inch speakers in stereo. So the 12-inch and the horn are in mono, and then the coaxial speakers provide stereo separation. It's also got stereo XLR outputs, so you don't have to mic this thing up on stage. You just plug an XLR into the back, or 2 XLRs if you want stereo, and send that directly into the front of house console, which makes playing with it live really nice. You're not having to worry about house microphones or bringing your own microphone. And I mean, how would you mic an amp that has 6 speakers? But it's also got XLR sends and returns. So if you have stereo effects, you can run your stereo effects through actually 1/4-inch sends and returns for effects. And it's also got stereo monitor inputs. So you can use this thing as your stage monitor as well as your amp. And I often do that because we're a 7-piece band, and most venues that we're playing at don't have 7 wedge monitors. Okay. So to make sure that I have the ability to hear the guys on the other side of the stage, I'll often ask to have a separate monitor send run through here. And you would think that having a monitor send running through the same amp that you're playing might crowd your frequencies, but I found that it actually works really well. And then I can control the blend of the volumes between the monitor send that I'm getting from the monitor console and my tone. So if I need to hear a little bit more of me, I can turn me up compared to the monitor and the rest of the band. So it also is integrated with this Line 6 floorboard, which basically acts as like a MIDI controller for the effects that are built into the amp. You got the ability to switch between 4 presets and banks of 32 sets of 4 presets. So you can create your set list before the show, put the songs in order, and then as you're playing, whenever you want to change your tone, you just press A, B, C, or D, and then bank down to the next set of A, B, C, D. It's also got the ability to turn on, like a stomp box, your overdrive effects, modulation effects, delay effects, reverb. It has volume and wah function, as well as tap tempo. And this communicates with the amp through a Cat5 cable, which is easy to replace, easy to use. It's also integrated really well with this iPad app that allows you to go in more detail and see your signal chain as it goes through your amp, and adjust where things are in your signal chain, and adjust your gate, EQ, compression, change the settings for the amp modeling that you're using, change the settings for the phaser or whatever modulation and delay effects that you're using, which is really nice, really easy to use. You can do pretty much everything through the knobs on the back of the amp, but I find that that's just a little bit too difficult. I don't like the scrolling through with one knob and pressing to go through the menus. It's really nice to have everything laid out very simply and straightforward on the iPad app. So I've got, while the amp has all of these effects of Line 6, that Line 6 has created over the years, I'll be honest, not all of them are great. Where it'll work in some applications, but it's not the right tone for what I really want. So I've supplemented the effects and whatnot with the amp with a few effects pedals. So I've got the first in my signal chain is this Electro Harmonix Soul Pog. The Soul Pog is a combo pedal. It's got two effects in it. One is the Soul Food Overdrive pedal, which is a lot like the Ibanez Tube Screamer that a lot of guitarists use, like Trey Anastasio from Fish. It's similar to that, but it's a little bit more warm, which with harmonica being such a bright instrument and the frequency range being shifted just a little bit above the frequency range on the lower chords on a guitar, open chords on a guitar, I find that having a warmer overdrive is a lot nicer, more pleasing sounding, and more musical sounding than a brighter overdrive or distortion or fuzz. And then that runs into a POG, which is the polyphonic octave generator. It's essentially an octave pedal. It adds an octave above and an octave below to your dry signal, and you can blend the volumes of the three. And with that, I usually have my dry signal turned all the way up, and then I add in a little bit of a lower octave just to fatten things up on the bottom end. And that runs into a Keeley Vibroverb, which is a wonderful little toy. It's a reverb pedal that adds modulation effects to the reverb tail. So the initial attack is clean, and the reverb tail has either tremolo, harmonic modulation, or phase modulation. And so doing like little punctuated notes that then trail off with that effect is quite cool. I'll give you a little example. That's clean tone with a little bit of reverb from the amp, and then here's with the vibroverb. And then with the harmonic modulation. And then phase.
Now, can you demonstrate the first piece of equipment that you talked about there?
The POG, so with the same clean tone. Here's with the overdrive turned on, give me a little bit more grit and a little bit more volume. And then the octaves. Now, the octave I use a lot with the next piece that I have, which is a Boss Rotary Ensemble. This recreates the sound of like a Leslie rotary speaker. So there's this thing called the Doppler effect. If you've ever heard a train whistle blowing as it passes by you, how the tone of it and the pitch of it seems to change as it comes by. That, or car driving by, that whoosh sound as it picks up in intensity as it gets closer, and then drops off in intensity as it gets farther away. It recreates that with simulating two speakers rotating opposite of each other, so the top speaker being more high end and the bottom speaker being more low end. So the Boss Rotary ensemble that I have sounds, the clean tone is with the octave. It starts to really recreate the sound of a Hammond organ, which is a lot of fun. And as a harmonica player, a lot of times you end up sort of getting stuck just because of the instrument. You get stuck as a solo instrument, and these two effects really allow me to recreate the sound of an organ, which means that we're not hauling an organ around with us, and it allows me to play a more supportive role in the band. So when the guitar player is taking a solo, I can support and complement him with organ tones rather than playing counter melody lines that might get in the way, or just sitting back and not playing. So then through the amp, some of the effects that I have on the amp, I found that wah pedal is a lot of fun to use with harmonica. That in combination with the rotary, you can sort of recreate the drawbar effects, or sort of emulate the effect that the drawbars have on an organ. So I've got the Line 6 wah pedal, which the amp has a few different models, but I found that the throaty model and the Line 6 model are my two favorites. I use those on pretty much all of my patches. I did find that the Line 6 wah pedal models are generally pretty wide wahs and really boost the high end, which is great for guitar. When you kick in the wah pedal, you want a little bit of a volume boost, and you want it to emphasize the high end a bit, because you're usually using the wah pedal either when doing rhythmic strumming or doing the lead line. I wanted something that would allow me a little bit more flexibility as using it in supportive roles. So I wanted a wah pedal that emphasized more the low end and the lower mids, and would work really well with the octave and rotary pedal. So I've got a RMC 3FL wah pedal, which is a fully tunable, fully customizable wah pedal. You can adjust the range of the wah, the Q, the levels of the low and mid, and there's just so much that you can adjust with this thing. And I don't use it a whole lot, but in specific settings, usually if I'm trying to do more supportive stuff with the organ. So here's what this sounds like. With the POG is well turned on. And then with the organ. So you can really hear the difference between the RMC and the Line 6.
Right, yeah, you can. The RMC is clearly low and low mids.
Yeah, and
in comparison,
I've found that it's a little gritty sounding, a little dirtier sounding, especially the more that you boost the low end. But if I want something clean, then the Line 6 is perfect for clean. Adding a little bit of grit, so long as I know that it's there, is fine. And that's one of the things I want to talk about, is really knowing your gear and knowing what it all does. it's really important to feel comfortable with what you have. That way when you go to turn on an effect while playing live, it's not going to be a surprise.
Well, I also assume that it would make practices when you're establishing your own lines with a song that you or somebody else may have created, that that you can establish your part a lot faster if you know exactly what the capabilities are and what, the degree of flexibility that you have.
Oh, absolutely. And in jamming situations live, like let's say you're doing something improv, like with a jam band or a jazz, jazz group, being able to on the fly create the tone that you want for the moment and do it really quickly is really important. So familiarity with the equipment that you have and the layout is really important. So I've set everything up the same way every show, every practice. It's always the same. I don't change the settings wildly. So with the Boss Rotary Ensemble, I'm using a Ernie Ball VP Junior volume pedal just to control the speed of the rotary. It's got two buttons, one to turn on and off the effect and one to change the speed of the rotary from slow to fast, and you can set a different slow speed versus fast speed and the rise time, how quickly it ramps up. But I like having the control of saying, all right, I don't want just one speed for slow and one speed for fast. I want to be able to match the speed of the rotary to the song and to the tempo of the song. All right, so the iPad integration with the Line 6 Firehawk amp is, like I was saying, really very nice. You have your whole signal chain listed out here, starting off with a noise gate, so basically saying anything below a certain volume, whatever your threshold is, isn't allowed through. Anything above is. And that's really great for harmonica, especially to help reduce feedback. So if I'm not actively playing, then I don't have to worry about the microphone starting to feedback or picking up other instruments on stage from bleed from the drums or bass or what have you. And that goes into the wah pedal, which you can choose between a few different wah pedals. I really find that I like the throaty and the Line 6. The colorful wah is pretty good for what I use, but it's been pretty much completely replaced by the Real McCoy RMC3 that creates that sort of grittier wah tone. Then you have your stomp effects. So if you have overdrives, delays, fuzz pedals, and there's so many to choose from, so many different types to choose from. And within you can adjust all the different settings on them, so the amount of drive, the little bit of EQ, and the output. So you can use it to boost your signal or just color your tone. They have a ton of amp models, all of which you can adjust and tweak specifics. So let's see here. They have all these recreated American amps like Fender Deluxes, Fender Tweeds, lots of amps and lots of heads to choose from. A bunch of British style amps if you're going for more of the British rock tones. High gain amps if you're into heavier rock and metal. And then a lot of clean options as well. So if you're playing an acoustic instrument, like an acoustic guitar, this amp works really well for, or if you're playing like keys and you don't want any amp to color your tone, you can choose no amp or a tube preamp model. I often honestly go back and forth between either no amp, tube instrument preamp, or a couple of the American amp models. I really like the Blackface double and the Tweed Bassman. Those are honestly the foundational amp models that I use mostly. A couple of songs I'll go for more of the typical blues, smaller amp, turned way up to overdrive out of the amp. And so they have a Line 6 Bayou head model that creates that like swampy, gritty tone for some of the blues songs that we do. Then you have compression, which just limits your dynamics. So anything that's above a certain volume, whatever your threshold is, say negative 12 dB here, is reduced by a certain ratio. And then as it's compressed, your loudest volume is going to be reduced. So you can make up gain here, which is nice. I don't use a whole lot of compression. I generally just have it set for everything as a pretty light compression and light makeup gain, just so that when I'm playing faster phrases with individual notes, the individual notes come out really clearly. Then we've got a 4-band parametric EQ that is after the amp and wah pedal, and it's not the way that I would ideally have it set up, where you can see the EQ curve visually. Having the sliders, it works. It's functionally really useful, but personally, I'd like to see the curve itself. But having an EQ, a 4-band parametric EQ after the amp and the amp model EQ is a really nice thing to blend your tones. Then of course volume, the volume pedal and the floorboard, you can adjust the max and minimum positions. Modulation effects, this is where you can really start to get out there and weird with your tone. So Line 6 has a ton of chorus pedals, phasers. They have their own rotary pedals, sort of like the Boss Rotary Ensemble that I have. Choruses and some other weirder tones. They're a little harder to explain. And one of the things I really like about this is that a lot of them are in stereo. So you can start to explore stereo effects where it can really fill the room and get weird. In addition to modulation effects, they also have a lot of filters and synths. So auto-wahs, harmonies, things that recreate like a Moog synthesizer effects, their version of the Digitech whammy. So this is where you can turn your guitar into like a synthesizer. And I use these really sparingly with harmonica. The tracking on them is a little slow for something like harmonica, where the pitch shifts and when you bend notes it doesn't track smoothly. That and these force feedback pretty intensely, especially the synthesizer effects. I do use the auto-wah with violin a good bit for funkier tunes. And then you have delays, all of which you can adjust the tempo. You can type in your BPM for the song, and you can save the patch for the BPM of the song, and then when you bring up the song, it's automatically right there at the right tempo, so you never have to worry about tapping it out, but you can either on the iPad itself or on the floorboard. And they have a nice selection of different delays, multi-head delays, echoes. I really like the tube echo for adding a little bit of grittiness to the delay tone. So if I'm playing a more gritty blues song and I want to have a little bit of echo to it, then the echo can be more grit than the clean tone coming in. Then you have your FX loop, and you can adjust the send and return levels and the mix of the FX sends. And then reverb, again, a really nice selection of different reverbs. I tend to stick to either a spring or the hall reverb. And then at the end of the chain, you have a global EQ. And looking at this, you're probably wondering how I'm getting by with a high-pass cut at 2.5 kilohertz. But again, with all of these effects and an open microphone with harmonica, you really need to cut out a lot of the high end. Plus, harmonicas being such a bright instrument, like to cut out a lot of the high end, but it keeps feedback at bay, and you can tune it to the room, tune it to the stage, so you can hear well. And playing in an environment like this is going to sound differently than playing on a big stage or a small stage. And of course, with all of these, or not all of them, but most of the effects things, you can slide them around in your signal chain. So if you want your delay to come before the overdrive or before the amp, you can do that, or it can be after the amp. However you want to configure it, there's a good bit of flexibility. The Helix Line 6 pedal board has even more flexibility with this, and even more amp models and effects. But for where I am right now, this does enough for me. So I guess having all of these things available to you, it'd be really easy to be overwhelmed, which is why having a really clear thought process on what you want to do with your tone, having a sound in your head, is really important. You have really clear goals of what you want, and then you're not buying a bunch of things and just trying everything out and seeing what works. You're trying to find a specific thing that does what's in your head. You may not know what the effect is or what it's called and what brand gives you that sound that you want, but you at least have a direction to go in. And of course, having a lot of tools at your disposal means that you can experiment and create sounds that you wouldn't have thought of being in your head. Layering phaser and chorus, or phaser and flange with a rotary pedal creates this sound that you wouldn't get through an organ, but it's like an organ running through effects, and it just allows you to have more fun. And it's important whenever you're buying gear that it suits the purpose of what you want it to do, but it also allows you room to grow. If you go, okay, I'm going to buy this piece of equipment that does for me exactly what I want for right now, maybe a year later when you want something a little bit more, you need to go out and buy something else or replace what you've already bought. So I recommend, if it means spending a little bit more money, waiting a little bit longer to get what you really want, get what you really want, and get something that'll allow you room to grow. Because, like I said earlier, you're never going to be satisfied with your tone. You're always going to be coming up with new ideas and wanting something for the next level, the next song, the next idea. Having the tools at your disposal to grow into it is really nice. And of course, having all this stuff, again, it's really important to have everything be reliable. Buy higher quality equipment and protect it. Organize it well so that you know the layout, you know how everything works, and you're really familiar with each little piece of the puzzle. Then you can be comfortable using it live, so it's super simple to create new tones, super simple to implement on the fly, and you're not having to fight the tap dance of turning things on and off and like, oh, make a mistake and turn on a delay on a song that doesn't need delay, and then it rings out, trails off forever. You can do something that's pretty embarrassing or make some silly mistakes if you're not really comfortable with your gear. And so all of that goes back to the old adage of practice makes perfect. Practice, practice, practice. As much as you're practicing, running scales and learning techniques on your instrument, you should practice using the equipment itself and the effects. And if you're wanting to go seamlessly from one song into another and it's a very drastic change in tone, then have a plan for how you're going to make those changes, and don't turn on too many effects to where you can't quickly turn them all off to get to a clean tone for the next song. Which is one of the really nice things about this Line 6 amp. So you can create your whole tone that you want for a song, name it, save it to the amp, save it to the cloud, save it to the iPad, so it's backed up in 3 places, and then you have, like I said before, it's got sets of 4 and 32 sets of 4 presets. So I have each song tone saved, and I can put them in order for our set list, which means that I always have a set list with me. I don't have to write one down, or if one gets snagged off the stage before we play or what have you, it's here on my iPad, and I can easily just go one song in the next, and it automatically brings up everything. All the tones, the delays and modulation effects are all tap tempo assigned to the click track that our drummer has in his ear, so we're always starting off at the same tempo, and really makes for ease of use, which is all important when you're playing live. So like I said, you're never going to be satisfied with your tone, and I'm certainly not. There are a few next steps that I really want to take, and just to give you an idea of how I'm going about it, the reliability being a big factor. I think the next things that I'm going to invest in is new cables for everything. I've sort of pieced together the cabling of this with what I already had laying around the house. So I've got this loom of all of my 1/4-inch cables. So from the beginning of the signal chain going into the amp, and then the stereo FX sends and stereo FX returns, and the Cat 5 cable for the Line 6 pedal board, all running in here. And again, with reliability, I have an extra cable, extra 1/4-inch cable already in the loom, so that if one of my sends or returns goes out, I can easily just swap out with the backup. But I've found that using any old cable and having different brands and different gauge cables can mess with your tone. So one of the things I want to do next is go through and replace all of my cables with new cables that are all the same brand. I'd like to also allow more room to grow with my pedal board, which this is pretty big as it is, and there are some other effects that I want to get. So I want to recreate a pedal board that is 2-tiered so that I can take up a little bit less floor space if I keep adding more things. Otherwise, I'm just going to be surrounded by an array of pedals, whereas I easily just have one level here, another level just a little bit higher, for the ones that I don't turn on and off as much. So going back and forth between violin and harmonica, I'm actually, in between songs, bending down and unplugging the harmonica and plugging the violin in, which really pretty much precludes me from switching from harmonica to violin mid-song. So getting an A/B switch so I can have both of them plugged in and switch between harmonica and violin seamlessly. Also with violin, oftentimes being loud on stage, it's hard to really hear the pitch, and with it being a fretless instrument, it'd be nice to have a visual representation of pitch. So I want to get a tuning pedal that I can just always leave on, and then if I can't really hear myself well enough to make sure I'm dead on accurate with my pitch, I can just look down and see how far off I am, flat or sharp. And then there are a few other toy effects that I want to get. I'd really like to get a Digitech DT Whammy. I'd like to upgrade from the Soul Pog to have an actual Soul Food overdrive pedal, and the Pog 2, which adds 2 octaves above and below rather than 1 octave. That, or they make this Hog series harmonic octave generator, which adds not only 2 octaves above and below, but adds other tones like thirds and fifths, so you can harmonize. And it does a whole bunch of other things. It's one beast of a pedal. I'm also on the hunt for a flange pedal that sounds like the whooshing of a jet flying overhead, you know, like a fighter jet flying over. Been in search of that, and the Line 6 flangers are okay. They're just not that sound. So if anyone has a suggestion on a flange pedal that does that, I'd love to hear it. I'd also like to start exploring more with FX loops, and one of the dream pedals, you know, to get the dream rig is the Line 6 Helix effects pedal board. And that has like 4 stereo FX sends or something ridiculous like that. So you can really customize your signal chain, where you have your overdrive wah, and then out of that a whole separate signal chain that blends with your normal signal chain. Be able to incorporate effects that work together in unique ways. You know, if you have your wah pedal before your overdrive or after your overdrive, it makes a huge difference. Same as if you have your delay feeding back into a modulation effect, or the modulation effect feeding back into the delay. So having customization with your signal chain is something I'd really like to start exploring more. And so the Line 6 Helix is like the next dream big purchase to get. It's something I'd like to go into. And, you know, of course, just figuring out the footprint and the logistics of all of this, and how to make it easily transportable and easy to set up on stage. I'd like to simplify as well as add flexibility and complexity to it. But I mean, really, the overall idea is, you know, my first goal in music is to get to a point where the only limitation is my own creativity and the creativity of my bandmates. So there's never, you know, I guess as a career, get to a point where money isn't holding us back, where, you know, we come up with a really wild, crazy idea that's never been done before, and we don't have someone telling us, no, you can't do that. There's not the technology, there's not the infrastructure, or there's not the money behind doing it. And I think it applies as well to creating your tone. You know, get the gear that allows you to open up all of the doors, open up all of the windows, and have the only limitation be your creativity and how you use it. So, yeah, build a rig that allows you to create any tone that you have in your head and start creating tones that no one else has discovered before. And I guess I'd also like, if anyone has any suggestions after, you know, seeing what I've done, what I have, I'd love suggestions on where to go next and ways to improve this.
Very good. Very good. this has been interesting and absolutely thorough in terms of a rig description.
Yeah, I hope it's not too much detail and too boring, but I wanted to share what I have because I know a lot of people recently have been asking about it and wanted to just share what I have.
Very good, very good. All righty, well, thank you.
Thank you.